Let me tell you a story about a man who looked like he was carved out of a mountain. A giant born in a quiet Italian village who would one day walk among legends. It all began in a place called Sequels, tucked in the northeast corner of Italy, where the Alps kiss the sky and the world still moves slowly. That's where Primo Carnera took his first breath, and from the moment he stood on his own 2 feet, the world looked up, literally. He was massive, even as a child. The locals would gather just to catch a glimpse of him walking down the dirt roads, towering above the rest. But behind that mountain of muscle was a gentle soul, a boy raised with old-school values, shaped by hardship and driven by something deeper than just the desire to fight. He wanted to matter. He wanted to make something of himself. Life didn't hand him a silver spoon, but it did give him a fighting chance. Primo eventually left Italy, chasing something bigger than the mountains of his hometown. He fought his way through the boxing world, not always with praise, and not always with fair treatment. The whispers came. Too big, they said. Too slow. But he kept punching, kept moving, and somewhere along the way, the world took notice. Not because he was perfect in the ring, but because he refused to quit. In 1939, he found something outside the ring that changed everything: love. He married Giuseppina Kovacic, a post office clerk from Gorizia. Not a Hollywood starlet, not someone from the glitz and glamour, just a good, steady woman who saw the man beneath the muscle. They built a life together, far from the roar of the crowd. By 1953, Primo and Giuseppina had settled in Los Angeles, chasing the American dream with quiet dignity. No spotlight, no stage, just a man, his wife, and their 2 children, Umberto and Giovanna Maria. He opened a restaurant and a liquor store, businesses that served regular people. Nothing fancy, just honest work from a man who had known too much of the opposite. His son, Umberto, would grow up to become a doctor. The fighter's son saving lives. Imagine that. That's the kind of legacy Primo left behind. He didn't just fight with his fists. He fought for a life worth living, for his family, for peace after the storm. In 1967, Primo returned to where it all began. Back to Sequels. Back to the mountains that once watched over him as a boy. That's where he took his last breath, at age 60, after a long battle with illness. But make no mistake, he went down a warrior, even if it wasn't in the ring. Some fighters chase belts. Primo chased purpose. And in the end, he found it. He wasn't just big. He was huge. In a world where most men barely scratch 5'7", and in his homeland of Italy where the average height was closer to 5'5", Primo Carnera looked like a walking skyscraper. He was listed in the papers as 6'7". Truth was, he was in shy of that, but no one cared. One glance, and it was clear. This man was something else. He carried 275 pounds of solid mass. And when he stepped into a ring, the very air seemed to shift. They called him the Ambling Alp. And believe me, it fit. Picture him next to his opponents. 60 pounds heavier, half a foot taller, longer arms, a wider chest. When he raised his gloves, it was like watching a bear square off with a pack of wolves. And when he threw punches, earthquakes didn't shake cities like that. But before the lights and headlines, before the chants and doubts, he was just a poor kid from Sequels, a small Italian village. Nothing fancy, just mountains, farmland, and old roads. But even as a boy, Primo stood out. He was the kid who couldn't fit in chairs at school, who ducked through doorways, whose hands looked like slabs of granite. The world started whispering. This boy was meant for something. At 21, he had his first professional fight. It was 1928, in Paris, against a man named Leon Cebullo. Primo didn't waste time. Boom, knockout in round 2. The giant had arrived, and he wasn't just a fighter. He was a show. Reporters couldn't get enough of him. One news release even described his morning meal like it was a full buffet for a football team. A quart of orange juice, 2 quarts of milk, 19 pieces of toast, 14 eggs, a loaf of bread, and half a pound of ham. And that was just breakfast. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. After winning his first 6 fights, he got disqualified in round 1 against a man named Franz Diener. That could have rattled anyone. Not Primo. He brushed it off like a fly on his shoulder. Came back, knocked out 7 more opponents. Fought young Stribling twice. Each match ending in a disqualification. 1 win for each man. And then, Primo went right back to Diener and knocked him clean out in round 6. See, for Primo, it was never about looking perfect. It was about standing up, again and again, no matter what knocked him down. By 1930, he took his enormous frame to America, and that's where the legend really took off. 17 fights, 17 knockouts. He tore through opponents like a man on a mission. Fans packed arenas just to see him. Not because he was flashy or loud, but because watching him fight was like watching a building come alive. And then came 1932. Primo was matched with a man even taller than him, a Portuguese fighter named Santa Camarão, who stood 6'8". It was the battle of the giants, and the world watched with wide eyes. Round 6, Primo knocked him out cold. The message was loud and clear. There's only one king in this jungle. But boxing can be brutal. In 1933, Primo knocked out Ernie Schaff in 13 grueling rounds. 4 days later, Schaff was gone. The headlines were merciless. But what many don't know is that Schaff had stepped into that ring already injured, recovering from a beating by Max Baer and a severe illness. Primo never bragged about that fight. There was no joy in it, just the heavy silence of a man who knew how cruel the sport could be. Still, he marched on. Primo Carnera wasn't just a fighter. He was a phenomenon, a man who seemed born out of legend, trying to make sense of the world around him. He was mocked at times, doubted, even used, but he kept stepping into that ring because deep down, he believed in what he was doing. He wasn't trying to be a hero. He was just trying to build a life, and build it he did. But that part comes later. It was June 29th, 1933, at the Madison Square Garden Bowl in New York. The lights burned bright, the crowd was on edge, and across the ring stood the heavyweight champion of the world, Jack Sharkey. But everyone was looking at the other guy, the Mountain, the man who seemed too big to be real. Primo Carnera. No one thought he could do it. Not the press, not the fans, maybe not even his own team. But in round 6, Carnera landed a punch that shook the city, and Sharkey hit the floor like a bag of bricks. Boom. Just like that, the kid from Sequels, Italy, was now the heavyweight champion of the world. He wasn't done. He held on to that title with his bare hands, defending it against Paulino Uzquedin and Tommy Loughran. Both won the full 15 rounds. Neither could break him. But then came Max Baer. On June 14th, 1934, Carnera faced Baer in a fight that was less boxing match and more all-out war. Baer was wild, unpredictable, dangerous. Carnera got knocked down again and again, 7 times, 10 times, maybe even 12. The records don't agree. But what's clear is this: Carnera kept getting up, even when his ankle broke, even when his body screamed to quit. He kept rising again and again until the referee finally stopped it. That loss was hard. The giant had fallen. But instead of hiding away, Carnera went right back to work. He fought in Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, racking up wins, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with fans. He was still fighting, not just for titles, but for dignity, for his name, for his pride. Then came June 25th, 1935. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber. Quick, sharp, lethal. 6 rounds. Carnera was knocked out. And though he kept fighting, something had changed. The wins were fewer. The losses hit harder. His body started to give out. By 1938, he was battling something even tougher than a boxer: diabetes. Doctors took out a kidney. And just like that, the career that had once lit up arenas around the world began to fade. By 1944, Primo Carnera hung up the gloves. But here's the thing about Carnera: he never stopped fighting. Despite being used, cheated, and robbed blind by his own management, who left him with barely a dime, Carnera never played the victim. He still smiled, still pushed forward. He had racked up 89 wins, 72 by knockout, more knockouts than any heavyweight champion in history at the time. He was the first man to win both the European and world heavyweight titles. He was the 3rd European to become world champ after Bob Fitzsimmons and Max Schmeling. And for over 25 years, he remained the last European to wear that crown until Ingemar Johansson shocked the world in 1959. His fights weren't just about titles. They made history. His bout with Paulino Uzquedin in Italy, the first time in 20 years that a world heavyweight title was contested in Europe. And it was the first time two Europeans ever fought for the crown. That wouldn't happen again until Lennox Lewis met Frank Bruno in 1993, 60 years later. Even when the punches stopped, Carnera's story didn't. He turned to movies. In 1933, while he was still champion, he starred in The Prizefighter and The Lady, ironically squaring off against Max Baer, just a year before their real fight. He played himself in Mighty Joe Young in 1949, tried his hand as a giant wrestler and a kid for 2 farthings, and even showed up as a towering warrior in Hercules Unchained. But here's the twist. In 1945, years after boxing had nearly broken him, Primo laced up the gloves again, just to see if he still had it. 2 wins, and then he shifted to something new, wrestling. And just like that, Carnera was back on top. Fans poured in to see the massive Italian throw men across the ring like rag dolls. In the span of a year, he went 120 matches without a loss. One of those wins came against Ed Strangler Lewis, a former world champ. Another big name, Max Baer, showed up just to watch him perform. He ended his wrestling career in 1962. After everything, after all the pain, the knockdowns, the betrayals, the surgeries, he walked away from the ring still standing. This was a man who started with nothing in a quiet Italian village. A man who towered over the world, not just with his size, but with his heart. A man who kept going, even when everyone said he was finished. Primo Carnera didn't just fight in the ring. He fought in life. And even when the bell finally rang for the last time, he walked away like a champion, because deep down, he always was one. Primo didn't come to America just to box. No, he arrived like a circus act, a 7-foot colossus from Italy with fists the size of frying pans. But from the moment he stepped off the boat in 1930, the game was already being played behind his back. Mobster Auntie Madden had already bought his contract. The same Madden who ran nightclubs with jazz and bullets now had a giant under his thumb. And who better to train him than Abe Attell, a man still stained by the Black Sox baseball scandal. Yes, that Abe Attell. Though he somehow convinced the jury he wasn't that Abe Attell. Primo's first real test came in 1929 against young Stribling. They fought twice. The first time, Stribling fouled him. The second time, Primo returned the favor. Both fights ended in disqualifications. The crowd wanted drama. They got confusion. Sports writers didn't know what to make of it. One even joked that Stribling was treating Carnera like one of those small-town setups, where the endings decided before the first bell. Then came Big Boy Peterson in January 1930. Primo flattened him in round 1, but something smelled off. No one was betting. And Big Boy, he actually punched himself in the jaw while falling. The New York Times scratched its head, and even the boxing commissioner watching ringside didn't like what he saw. But no one dare investigate. A week later, Carnera faced Elzier Ryu. That fight barely lasted 47 seconds. Ryu dropped 6 times like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The Illinois Boxing Commission stepped in. They didn't blame Primo, but they slapped Ryu with a fine and stripped him of his license. People were starting to talk. March 1930, Kansas City. George Trafton came in and left just as fast. Primo knocked him cold in round 1. Trafton was banned afterward, but Carnera was untouched. Same month, different town, California club fighter Bombo Chevalier stepped in. But before things even heated up, one of Chevalier's corner men threw in the towel. The audience was stunned. Bombo didn't look hurt. Rumors flew. Carnera's paycheck was held back. And when they dug deeper, Mrs. Chevalier said her husband had been asked to take a dive, but pointed the finger at the manager. Then it got weirder. Chevalier claimed his corner rubbed something on his face that burned his eyes and nose. In May, Carnera got suspended. By June, he was back in the ring. This time against George Godfrey. A big, laid-back fighter, Godfrey was clearly in charge. Then came the twist. Godfrey got disqualified for a foul. No towel throwing allowed this time. Godfrey's license was revoked. Carnera walked away clean. By now, folks were looking at Carnera not as a rising star, but as a mystery wrapped in muscle. Time magazine said it outright. Carnera's career wasn't glorious. It was bizarre. Every opponent either crumbled too easily or got caught up in scandals. One even claimed his own cornerman threatened to kill him if he didn't lose to Carnera. Only one man in America had beaten Carnera up to that point, Jimmy Maloney. But Maloney wasn't exactly a world beater himself. Fat and sluggish, he was no hero. When they rematched, Carnera outpointed him. But by then, the shine was fading, and the questions weren't. Carnera's life was such a mix of myth and mystery that it inspired stories, plays, and movies. In 1956, Requiem for a Heavyweight hit TV screens, telling the tale of a broken giant, used and tossed aside. Everyone watching knew it was Carnera in disguise. Then came The Harder They Fall, a brutal film where a fixed giant is destroyed in his first real fight. Carnera sued the studio. He lost, but Primo kept his pride. He played himself in movies, starred in comic books, and even had a motorcycle named after him. He became larger than boxing. People in novels, songs, and even dreams were compared to him. His name was shorthand for giant around the world. But behind the towering frame and wide smile was a man who may never have truly been in control of his career. A man used by powerful people. A man who crushed others in the ring. Sometimes for real, sometimes not. This is the story of Primo Carnera, a man who walked into the world of boxing like a mountain, and left as a legend tangled in smoke.